Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to the last of EarthShift Global's fall series of webinars, and we are very pleased to have Alicia Ferrero with us. And Alicia is a business development associate on TerraCycle's brand partnerships team. She joined TerraCycle after completing her MBA and a research fellowship with the Villanova School of Business in Pennsylvania. Alicia brings diverse experience to her role with a background in the financial services, retail, and nonprofit spaces. She passionately believes that the future of the private sector lies in purposeful, mission-driven enterprise. And with that, I will stop my share and have Alicia share her screen, and we will be happy to hear her start her show.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly. I'm excited to be joining everyone today. Hopefully, are you all, or Holly, can you see my screen?
It looks good to go. And as usual, if everyone would please send any questions for Alicia to me privately, we will present them to her at the end of her presentation. So please go ahead, Alicia.
Perfect. Sounds good. So I will dive right in. And thanks again, everybody, for sharing your lunch with us today. But yeah, so as some of you may know, TerraCycle is a highly awarded and globally recognized recycling company developing circular solutions for difficult to recycle waste streams. And really my goal today with our time together is to share some insight into really one of the ways that TerraCycle gets at our fundamental mission to eliminate the very idea of waste. And that is by recycling the non-recyclable. So really it's this first pillar on the left-hand side of the cover slide. But to kind of take a step back, our entire reason for existing as a company is to address the colossal issue of waste. And really, if you think about it, the very concept of garbage, of waste, does not exist in nature. And garbage is a relatively modern idea. And the issue of plastic itself compounds everything, makes it much more difficult to grapple with. And as many of you have likely heard, there's gyres full of plastic waste cropping up across the world in our oceans, which in fairness exists mostly because our culture has gotten used to the convenience of disposability, coupled with the fact that plastic has some really fantastic qualities when it comes to product efficacy. It's durable, it's flexible, it's lightweight. But in so many ways, it's those very qualities that spell disaster when they're out in the environment. And so it's because of these truths that TerraCycle was born. So our founder and CEO, Tom Zaki, started the company out of his Princeton dorm room 15 years ago and really built the foundation for our entire business by empowering partnering brands and companies to make what we traditionally consider to be non-recyclable, recyclable through one of our many logistical platforms over the last few years that we've developed, but really first and foremost started with what we call our National Recycling Program, which will be the focus of our time together here. But that said, TerraCycle's breadth of expertise goes way beyond this platform now after being 15 years in this space. And we're working in a lot of other ways to kind of get at that mission to eliminate the concept of waste. And so another one of our focus areas is this kind of central pillar here, which is making everything from waste. So a great example of this is just kind of encouraging compelling integrations of recycled materials into existing supply chains, like our partnership with Head & Shoulders, a Procter & Gamble brand that came out with the world's first shampoo bottle made of 25% ocean plastic last year. So that's kind of another one of the spaces that we're working in. And really our newest line of business is this eliminate the concept of waste pillar, which really looks at designing out of disposability altogether by working with the world's most iconic brands to introduce. It hasn't launched yet even. There will be an announcement at the World Economic Forum in January to introduce durable and reusable packaging. So definitely stay tuned on that early next year. But with that said, it all started with our national recycling program. And as you can see, in the last 15 years, we've really grown to operate across the globe in 21 countries currently. And I think it's important or interesting to note here that regionally, we are owned or partially owned by some of the largest waste management companies out there, like Suez in Europe or Waste Connection in Canada. And I personally think that this is remarkable or noteworthy because truly all of these organizations traditionally have, their business model has been quite linear, wouldn't you say? So figuring out ways to kind of send all of the waste we generate in our everyday lives to landfill. But the fact that the stakeholders like these are really seeing that the future is circular and investing in a company like TerraCycle, whose mission is the exact opposite, to divert as much waste from landfill as possible, I think bodes very well for the future of waste management. But what do we mean by recycling the non-recyclable? What makes something recyclable or not? And I think that that's kind of really fundamental important to understand before really seeing the value and understanding how we've been able to kind of solve for crazy things like cigarette butts or dirty diapers. And really, it's not a matter of science or technology, but of economics. And what do I mean by that? So we here at TerraCycle have an in-house team of R&D and polymer scientists that have proven time and again that really, where there's a will, there's a way. We can give virtually any material out there a second life. But more often than not, all of the types of things that kind of fall outside of the typical materials that we currently can recycle curbside, like clear PET or aluminum cans, glass, the value of these materials like aluminum, glass, covers the cost of processing such that recycling companies can actually profit off of recycling, whereas that equation does not hold up with anything that has multiple layers or complex pieces or even flexible plastics. As many of you may know, that's not the type of material that you can easily drop curbside in recycling infrastructures. So we've really honed in on this right-hand side of the Venn diagram by creating a platform that can drive value and allow brands and companies to kind of sponsor the gap between the value of these materials and to cover processing and logistics to make them, to give them a second life. And the reason we've been able to do this with all different types of shapes of partners is because ultimately consumers care about recycling, whereas though, as many of you in on this call may know, the carbon footprint associated with so many of the products that we consume every day might really come further upstream. What maybe it's how much renewable energy is used in your processing or supply chain transparency in sourcing materials. But what we've found is that people and consumers just understand recycling much more than, say, the carbon footprint of your supply chain. And we've really, in this platform, sought to tap into the fact that folks just understand that recycling something is good, whereas throwing something in the trash is not as good, right? And so we've partnered with many different stakeholders, from the largest number one or number two in their category CPG companies to small or starting startups, to really leverage the fact that there is appetite out there for products with an end-of-life solution to get at things like marketing and sales and communication value. And so in working with TerraCycle on this platform, of course, the first and I mean, on our end, the top return is the fact that we can create a national recycling solution for products and packaging that had to go to landfill previously. But each and every program that we run with our partners is tailored to get at any other goals that a brand may have, whether that's getting things like incremental shelf space at retail through promoting the recycling program, or perhaps it is improving brand perception, things like that. And so that's a huge part of where a partnership with TerraCycle starts with these types of organizations, is understanding, well, what are they currently facing in the market environment, and how can recyclability really help achieve those goals. So that is kind of high level, what is the program, and how can this work, or how can we recycle these weird or difficult to recycle items. So the rest of these slides are really going to walk through step by step how this program works. And really, it's a 3-step platform. So first and foremost, it's about how do we collect these specific waste streams in a way that's easy for consumers. The second piece is how do we solve for these kind of weird, complex waste streams that don't currently have a local solution. And then the third piece is how do we work with brands to engage with consumers around the fact that they're offering such an incredible resource to their customers. So it all starts with how we collect the waste. So here you can see all different shapes and sizes of collectors in many different TerraCycle programs around the world. Right now, we collect cigarette butts actually in 11 countries across the globe. So just a plug here for if you ever see these bins around, that's us. But just moving right along, so how can products and packaging be nationally recyclable on this platform? It essentially starts with a download label model. So brand partners work with us to get the word out about the fact that their packaging or their products are recyclable through TerraCycle. And once folks learn about this, all they have to do is go to our website, or in some cases, brand partners' websites directly, to sign up and participate in the recycling program. From there, it's just all about collecting and, in many cases, consuming a certain brand's waste, although some partners choose to collect for any brand of waste. And that can be in any box at their location. So, and we say locations, that'll make kind of more sense on the next slide, but this could be someone at home, or maybe it's at a school, parent-teacher school association, or any kind of community setting where products are consumed. And once that kind of box is full, folks can just go back to the website to download a shipping label that gets stuck onto the box that's prepaid, pre-addressed, to send those items in for recycling to TerraCycle. And another piece of this kind of mechanic is that brand partners can choose to incentivize participants with points that can be redeemed for charitable donations. So this is kind of a great way to take a program that really is addressing the negative, like the packaging or products that unfortunately previously had to go to landfill, and turning it into a positive, and engaging with other things that consumers care about, whether that's donating to a school or a cause that a brand cares about. And so it's this mechanic that gives a producer the ability to claim national recyclability, because if any of you are familiar with the FTC's green guides, in order for a product or package to be considered recyclable in the United States, greater than 60% of zip codes have to have access to a free recycling solution. And so this platform truly gives 100% of consumers access to recycling. And so as you can see here, this kind of digs into, well, what does a location mean? What does this look like on the ground? And what we've found in running these programs now for 15 years is that most often than not, once people hear about the fact that they can collect and recycle something that they had to throw away before, there are location leaders that crop up. And so these are people that are not just collecting on behalf of their own household, but they're becoming mini on-the-ground brand ambassadors for the recycling program and going out to create collection bins like what you kind of see in the center here. And engaging with all of the people in their community to encourage as much recycling as possible locally and participate in the program. And so really that's how the collection piece of the platform really comes to life. But that said, of course, as these programs grow and more people start participating, it also is possible to kind of create public collection location points. And that could be either something as simple as, well, taking a critical look at what current collection points are sending in the most waste and touching base with them to see if they're interested in becoming a public drop point. Or maybe it's a great tool for partners to engage with their key retailers to do something like what we did with McVitie's, which is kind of like a biscuit cookie brand in the UK, to put things like custom collection bins at retail to kind of drive foot traffic to the retailer, but also just shine a light on the fact that a recycling solution exists for something like your biscuit wrappers, for instance, in the UK. So that's the collection piece of the platform. And so the second piece, of course, is how do we solve for these complex waste streams? And so here you can meet very briefly our head of R&D, Dr. Ernell Simpson, who is behind many of the great solutions that we offer. But really, how do we solve for these complex waste streams in this platform? So first and foremost, it starts with someone sending in their box for recycling, and it arrives at one of our warehouses where we check those items in, which really from a brand's perspective allows for some really great and interesting information, like who is participating in this program, how much waste are they sending in, and where is it coming from, things like that. But once we've checked these items in, the next step is to aggregate this material with any other similar packaging or products that we are already collecting, because so much of solving for these complex waste streams is about having enough to do a processing run. So once we've kind of reached a critical mass point, we can then engage with a strategic network of partners to implement whatever process our R&D team deems necessary to create a new and usable format. And that's really key to understand when it comes to TerraCycle, because if Tom had founded the company 15 years ago and invested in XYZ processing equipment, we would have never been able to reach a point where we can say we recycle anything, because rather than owning the actual recycling process, as in the fixed assets, we only own the process and engage with whatever stakeholders across any given market to give that material a second life. And most importantly, we also line up an end buyer to use this new format and integrate that into an existing supply chain. And so it's our promise to any and all partners that work with us on this platform or any other that we will not landfill or incinerate any of the waste we receive for recycling. And so some examples of those downstream applications can kind of be seen here. So if we work with a lot of pet food brands, for instance, so people collecting their dog food packaging, that most typically will give plastic pellets because those flexible bags have multiple layers. Although, of course, we collect all types of materials through this platform. And really, the solution piece also represents a really great opportunity for brands to also get creative with their recycling programs. And so part of the solution could be a promotional gift, like what we've done with Garnier now for over 9 years. Garnier collects all personal care and beauty care packaging through their recycling program and donates a community garden to food deserts or urban communities and ties that up into a promotion at retail that's kind of like a social media contest where folks vote for where the gifts should go. So that's kind of one great example of how a partner has leveraged the solution to kind of tie back to ways that they can find value in the program. But that is definitely not the only example of how the solution piece can come to life. And we've done many closed loop applications in which essentially means that material we've collected back through the program can be reintegrated into that same brand's supply chain. So in the case of Sanford, we collected writing instruments and then made this ledge that you see here, because somehow all of those whiteboards that you see out there never have a ledge for your pens, right? So we were able to actually make a closed loop ledge with Sanford through their program. And another great example of this is we work with Mars Drinks, and they have a Flavia disc product, which I believe is more prominent in Europe, but essentially they allow their B2B clients to offer a recycling solution to collect back these discs that are then kind of reintegrated and made into the display that that all of these kind of customers use to get access to their, say if it's like K-cups or any type of drink product that Mars sells. So those are a couple of great examples of how the solution piece can really drive value for partners. And another kind of interesting capability of ours on the solution piece is upcycling. So I'm not sure, and we'll get a sense of this kind of towards the end once we reach the Q&A, but some of you may have heard of TerraCycle a few years back because of this type of activation, and we were really well known for this at one point. And it still continues to be kind of a really great way or great resource that we offer to partners, and that's rather than recycling and so therefore breaking down whatever packaging or material we collect and turning that into something else, we keep the integrity of the packaging and trade marketing, but give the material a new purpose. And so as you can see, like Tom's of Maine, this is kind of a pouch, or sorry, a tote bag, or maybe it's a backpack. All of these types of pieces can be created for our brand partners to really highlight once again the fact that nothing is waste. truly, if you think about it. And it does prove to be a great promotional tool to kind of point to the program and get people encouraged about recycling and participating. So that's the solution piece. And lastly, and I would argue most importantly, there's the engagement piece. So how can we help these brands find value in funding this type of program, and really encourage as much recycling as possible? So really it breaks into two buckets. So on the one hand, there's what TerraCycle does as the leader in this space. We can plug in these programs to our existing community of collectors of over 60 million people here in the US, and kind of getting the word out by running a robust PR campaign and doing strategic outreach on the program. But really, the second half, or essentially how do we support these brands, that is where the partnership begins, and we can have the discussions with our brand partners about, well, how can we layer this on to what you're already doing? Because these partners are, of course, the experts in their field at marketing and selling their products, but TerraCycle's expertise really starts with how can we communicate and use recycling to get at said goals. So some great examples of what this really looks like are on this slide here. So on the one hand, you've got Entenmann's, which is a kid snack brand. They partner with us on their Little Bites brand. And on the other hand, you've got Bausch & Lomb, which is a contact lens and optical or optician type manufacturer. Two very different products, right? I think we can all agree. But so in Entenmann's case, they really came to us and said that they had several goals, really. First, it was how can we engage with our key demographics, so school-aged children, around sustainability and encourage recycling? How can we also ramp up our social media presence? And how can we also use this to win at retail, which is so often the goal for all of our partners. And so our team helped them come up with their Turn Trash to Cash campaign, which, if you remember from that collection piece of the program, Little Bites was able to incentivize schools really to collect and recycle their packaging as a fundraising mechanism. And they really amped this up on social media to engage with parents and drive collections, and used it to also kind of engage with their key retailers that increasingly have their own sustainability goals and are looking for brands that can kind of contribute toward their sustainability kind of 2020 or 2025 goals. And they were able to get incremental shelf space at two of their top retailers. And we are just thrilled about this particular program because the team has straight up told us that without their program, they would have not seen the success that they had at both of those retailers. So on the one hand, that's Entenmann's, right, with their Trash to Cash campaign that our team pretty much ideated all the way through execution, like in partnership with the brand. Whereas on the other hand, you've got a very different product like Bausch & Lomb's contact lenses. And so they came to us because they had a few different goals. I think first and foremost, it's the fact that despite being incredibly convenient, daily contact lenses do kind of generate a lot of waste. I think there's no denying that. If you're opening a blister pack every day and throwing out your contact lens every day, that definitely adds up. So they wanted to kind of find a way to address customer concerns around that, while also kind of engaging with and retaining their key demographic, which is essentially doctors' offices, opticians. And so we helped them come up with their 1x1 recycling program, which brought national recyclability to all of Bausch and Lomb's products. That also allowed opticians' offices to become drop points and really drive foot traffic to their offices by offering a recycling program. And so they've really seen a lot of positive press even in the last 6 months, as I'm not sure if any of you have heard all of the news out there right now, and there's a lot of concern around contact lenses. Bausch & Lomb was recently highlighted in many top articles as the only brand that's really actively working in the space to find a solution or provide a solution for their products. So 2 great examples of really how our teams support partners in getting the word out there and encouraging people to recycle while also making it make business sense. And so some of the other ways that our teams kind of support partners in doing all of this is by creating things like custom collection materials, whether in their look and feel or maybe co-branded with TerraCycle. So you can see some great examples of kind of resources that participants can have when they're putting up their location. So when they're setting up their bins at a school or at a doctor's office, etc. And so yeah, like I kind of already touched on, our teams really execute robust campaigns targeting kind of key demographics through PR, social media, creating videos brand by brand. So each and every partnership comes to life quite differently in this sense. Because every target consumer and every product is different, right? And another great way that folks really get the word out about their recycling program is by leveraging our logo on pack, which comes as part of this program. So as you can see, many different partners out there have chosen to leverage the TerraCycle logo to really differentiate at the point of purchase. And this is the only symbol in the world that indicates national recyclability. Although this is, of course, optional. It's by no means required for brand partners to use the logo, but it's definitely a great way to kind of to point toward the recycling program. And like all of us know, as we're kind of interfacing here online, so much of how we consume and interface with the brands in our lives is online. So we, of course, work with all of our partners to kind of figure out, well, what is the right message, or how can we use this to drive web traffic or encourage folks to click through to the recycling program and participate. So just another one of our capabilities here for our brand partners. And another piece here is that this platform not only is a recycling program, so a recycling solution for products or packaging that had to go to the trash before. It's also a marketing initiative, because it's another great way to kind of engage with and interface with customers, kind of a great secondary or tertiary message. But it's also a sustainability platform, and many of our partners kind of rely on us to quantify and qualify the impact that their programs have. And so this is just another one of our capabilities to kind of deliver this information to our brand partners so they can be sure to tell the world about it, right? Because really they are leading in the space of kind of getting toward a more circular economy when it comes to plastic consumption, because it's not going anywhere. Plastics are a part of our lives and have really allowed for all of us to enjoy the comforts of modern life. But it's really so much more now about, well, how can we responsibly and smartly consume these types of materials? And so kind of the last piece here, and then I'll kind of turn it back over to Holly to start kind of the question and answer piece, is how we are able to bring these programs to life at retail. And it's kind of at the end of this presentation here because it's never something that these programs launch with. As you can imagine, in starting one of these programs, especially if it's a waste stream that is kind of new for us, there is a ramp-up curve in even telling people about the fact that, hey, you can, if you change your habits a little bit and collect XYZ packaging here or there, you can recycle these things. That takes a bit of time to build up. And so reaching a point where we can recycle in store or driving, getting things like incremental display by highlighting the program or even doing promotional giveaways, that's something that we can build up to with our brand partners once we kind of have a program up and running with folks participating, right? Because then in that sense, in partnership with these brands, we can kind of make the case for retailers to kind of consider including this recycling program in their stores. So that is essentially how our national recycling program works, how it drives value for the partners, and how we're able to solve for these kind of difficult and non-recyclable, not locally recyclable waste streams. So yeah, that's kind of the end of my show. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alicia. It's been very interesting to see how you do all this. I do have some questions from people. One of my audience says, don't these distributed recycling options result in significantly more packaging and shipping materials as individuals send in materials? And how does that impact the overall environmental impacts?
Sure, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in fairness, it's a question that we often get. And I think it's important to first point out that these programs, we highly encourage folks to reuse packaging. So when I say any available box, that's using whatever you have around at home, whether that's your Amazon box that you already got from your last purchase, or maybe even using the same packaging that you're collecting. So in the case of a lot of our pet food brands, folks will stuff in bags inside of bags, right, and kind of send that in for recycling. But we've actually done multiple life cycle analyses on these programs to kind of get a sense of, well, what is the environmental benefit of this versus virgin material? And across the board, diverting this waste from landfill and including the shipping and logistics associated with sending these items back. Because bear in mind, these supply chains are ongoing and shipping items anyway. They across the board have outweighed the environmental cost associated with purchasing virgin material. So that's something that we are very aware of and are always looking at, but I can say with confidence that these programs have a net positive environmental impact.
Well, that's really great to hear, because I had a listener asking me whether you did do life cycle assessment or not on your projects.
Perfect. So two birds, one stone.
Yeah, so we're happy to hear that. Let me ask you another who says, the idea of shampoo bottles with 25% ocean plastics is staggering. Do you see that as a long-term material resource? And that it's really amazing.
Yes, I completely agreed. And I recommend everybody to kind of Google away as either now or post this conversation, because if you look for Head and Shoulders beach plastic, you'll see a lot of great articles out there. But so our stance on this is that we are the only ones that are managing a global supply chain of ocean plastic, and I can say that we partner with NGOs and nonprofit organizations across the world collecting this material back, and rely on our kind of R&D team to develop the processes necessary to turn that material into a format that can deliver the specs to create something like a shampoo bottle. And we definitely see that as an area of growth. I can say that Procter & Gamble specifically, they're rolling out that promotion. So last year it launched in France at Carrefour, and they saw an excellent outcome from that kind of promotion. And they are rolling that out to multiple other markets and other brands. And we've got a few other organizations that are interested in kind of leveraging this unique storied material, noting that it of course comes at a cost. It's much more expensive to use ocean plastic than virgin material, but so much of our programs are about, well, how can we get at some other form of value to justify paying for something like this, right? So the fact that P&G came out with the first locally recyclable shampoo bottle made of ocean plastic is exactly as we're saying. It's amazing. So it's definitely something that is growing, ongoing. And yeah, ocean plastics are not the only focus area when it comes to storied plastics too. There could be litter, street litter, or cigarette butts. That's kind of a huge waste stream for us that we collect and kind of create things like ashtrays or benches, or garbage or recycling bins, things like that.
So wait, what are you said the cigarette butts, what are you using? What are those made into?
Cigarette butts, really, it can turn into any number of things. I can say that I've seen, we have as like samples here, we've made ashtrays out of cigarette butts, you know, so that's kind of like a compelling integration or a unique way to use the recycled material into something and turn it into something that is relevant for the waste stream. But I know that it is often made into plastic lumber, or even anything that has a plastic application that it wouldn't be kind of like a food and safety concern to incorporate cigarette filter waste.
Mm-hmm. So we've been hearing in the news and reading about China's recent plastics ban and how it's affecting the recycling industry. How is that affecting TerraCycle?
Excellent question, and it's something that has come up a lot, and I think it's affecting us in a few different ways. On the one hand, the recycling infrastructure out there, our local recycling infrastructure is in flux because China took on so much of all of the single stream recycling that we've all gotten used to. It's no longer kind of being addressed by them. So in a way, it's forcing a lot of different organizations to look at potentially working with us because so like your yogurt cups or your number 5 plastics, more and more often you're not able to recycle those locally anymore because there's no end market for those types of materials for pretty much that reason. What we were talking about early on, the economics of it just don't work out always. But when it comes to the actual day-to-day recycling, in our case, we are not affected by this China ban because the whole premise of our business is to create custom supply chains to solve for these materials locally. So here in the U.S., if anything, it's just spurring more local recycling businesses to open up. And so potentially finding more options when it comes to processing for these types of waste streams. So the China ban has been, it's an ongoing shift because there are kind of other Southeast Asian markets that are taking in all of our single stream recycling, but I would expect in the next year or two that is all going to change because it's very difficult to really solve for these waste streams in a way that makes business sense in the traditional recycling realm, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Someone asks, are there any common packaging materials that TerraCycle won't take because you've found no outlet, or has pretty much every material found an outlet?
Well, so it's an interesting question because we will never tell a partner, no, we're not going to work with XYZ waste stream. But what often happens is when we really look into the processing costs, maybe the logistical costs of allowing folks to send these items in, if it's maybe a regulated or hazardous waste type of material, if the cost is just too high and prohibitive for a potential brand partner, that is a scenario where we've said no, or not that we say no, but just that material does not get solved for at this point in time. But I can say with certainty that there has not been a case where there's been some weird or complex material that we've said, nope, we can't figure this out, because the entire premise of the model is that we have the technical ability to literally give anything a second life, and we will kind of find that end market, and design a process tailored to kind of whatever the end market demands, if someone is willing to pay and fill that gap, essentially.
So a question that tags on to that is, what's the strangest thing that TerraCycle recycles?
That's a good one. I think, I think dirty diapers is just crazy. It's actually launching this month, and next month we are launching with the Pampers brand the world's first diaper recycling bin in Amsterdam. So across Amsterdam in the Netherlands, there are now going to be these smart bins where folks can bring and drop off their dirty diapers for recycling. And so I think that's such an interesting way to
Wow, that is amazing. But so why only Amsterdam?
well,
or you need somebody who will take charge to do that?
Well, essentially, yeah, it's something that's dictated by the brand partners, because ultimately they are funding the project, and it's the type of thing that you've got to start somewhere, right? And I think the appetite I haven't been involved in that project directly, but I would assume that the appetite for recycling in Amsterdam is such that it seemed like a good place to start. And also the regulatory kind of hurdles could maybe play a role, and so we've been able to kind of support P&G in developing these bins that are compliant with local regulation. But yeah, essentially Amsterdam to start, and depending on how that program goes, how that pilot goes, could be something that grows beyond.
Okay. Another question is, what about biodegradable and compostable plastics? And shouldn't companies be moving more toward compostable packaging such as PLA?
Sure, yeah. That is something that comes up quite a bit. And the more I've learned about PLA, the more nuanced I've found it to be. And so...
Would you like to tell people what PLA is?
Oh, sure, of course. PLA is essentially polylactic acid, and it's a biodegradable plastic, essentially, that derives from renewable resources. And so the PLA is, I'm not sure if any of you have ever come across, say, like compostable cutlery, disposable cutlery, that type of thing. And there are some CPG goods out there that have compostable packaging. But our perspective on it is that, much like the issue with kind of recycling has to do with access, those types of PLA materials are most often only industrially compostable. So when you think of composting, there's backyard composting where you can just throw your organic matter and kind of turn that every once in a while, and over time you'll get compost. Whereas something like these kind of PLA plastics, biodegradable compostable plastics, they can only really break down under certain conditions, and so it requires an industrial facility to make sure that those items break down. And unfortunately, in this country, most people don't have access locally to an industrial composting facility. And even with that said, because with just that in mind, you could argue, well, isn't it a matter of just getting more industrial composting out there and kind of building access? But the very nature of polylactic acid is such that any composter or any composter that's kind of looking to ensure that their product, so compost, is of high quality, can't accept too much of these types of compostable plastics in their compost process. And if they're looking to make organic compost, forget it. There's never, those composters would never accept these kind of biodegradable compostable plastics. So even if industrial composting were to be something that's widely accessible, if we were to somehow magically shift every plastic that we consume in our everyday lives when it comes to food to compostable plastics, there just wouldn't be no way to make sure that these items actually break down and turn into compost, because it takes an incredibly long time to accomplish that. And so, yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a misnomer.
Exactly. It's very frustrating, actually, because on the one hand, it's so obviously it makes sense. Of course, if it were backyard compostable, that would be, then we wouldn't need to exist. Then we wouldn't, if we could somehow create a material that can just break down organically, that can provide all of the specs that people expect nowadays with their products, then TerraCycle wouldn't exist, and we would be happy with that, honestly. But unfortunately, that's not the landscape we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, what are some of the materials that do get recycled into? You mentioned these benches and ashtrays and lumber. Do you have any more items that, and you talked about these reusable products that people have used with their, still advertising their products. Is there anything else that comes to mind that we might not be thinking of?
You mean like what end markets or what end products could potentially be made by?
Yes, what end products? That's better.
Sure. Honestly, it's something that is a moving target constantly for us. We have a whole team of folks, and when I say a whole team, that you've got like a few people across each market we operate in globally, whose primary focus is to kind of identify which producers out there are looking for post-consumer resin. So honestly, it can be anything. It can be back into a bottle that says contains X amount of post-consumer content. But typically, I would say that it's not really a cut and dry answer. I can say that kind of what we already touched on, things like benches, things like planters, things like literally anything that that requires plastic. And we are even able to create food grade post-consumer resin if a buyer is willing to pay for the cost of that. So I'm sorry if that's not the direct answer you were looking for. But
no, well, it's like you say, it's the future's a moving target here. With
it's definitely, and I can say that even in my experience as a business development associate here at TerraCycle, we often get inquiries from CPG companies that are asking, well, where can I go to buy this post-consumer resin that can give us XYZ spec, you know? And those types of products can range like it's a wide range. It could be a hair or like consumer like like we were saying shampoo bottle, or maybe it's a water filter, or maybe it can any number of things. Maybe it's a shoe, you know, so anything.
Okay. Oh, I think I have another message that came in. Let me see. One more message here, one more question. Does the emergence of 3D printing and adaptive manufacturing help them?
Help us? The 3D printing? I would think so.
I think, yeah, I think that's what she means.
That's a really interesting question. I think it's not something that I'll admit that I've thought on too much before or has come up too much for me. I think my superficial understanding of the world of 3D printing is that that is also kind of in its early stages, and we're not really mass producing too much. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we're at a point where 3D printed products are coming out in volume. But I would definitely imagine that whenever that is the case, kind of creating a post-consumer resin that fits in with 3D printing technology is definitely within the realm of our capabilities. But to my knowledge, at least for now, 3D printing has not really greatly impacted the work that we've done so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Alicia, for your time and for sharing with us the interesting way TerraCycle has been working, and keep up the good work. I will try to have this webinar published, later on, and I promise everybody an interesting spring series starting sometime in the new year. So thank you, and I will end this webinar now.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Take care, Holly.
You too. Bye-bye.